Joining us from Nashua, New Hampshire, NBC News correspondent Hallie Jackson. Hallie, potentially a significant endorsement for Marco Rubio in South Carolina today. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so tomorrow, Trey Gowdy, Nicole, will be appearing with Marco Rubio, expected to give him his full support. This is something that has been percolating for a little bit. We saw in South Carolina a couple of weeks ago, Gowdy appearing with Rubio for some campaign events, and it was a little bit coy about whether or not he'd actually endorse. But that will happen Tuesday and Wednesday in Iowa. The two of them will be campaigning at several stops there to try to really shore up some of Marco Rubio's conservative credentials. You look at a guy like Trey Gowdy, who ran the Benghazi committee. He is well regarded among conservatives and could help Marco Rubio out when it comes to specifically this issue of, for example, immigration, where he's getting hit hard from the right. He's also getting hit hard by Donald Trump, who's taking aim at this Gowdy endorsement. Take a look. You can see some of these headlines. Donald Trump was tweeting about this over the Christmas break, hitting Gowdy, I should say, for his record, and sort of describing this endorsement as meaningless. Here's what Trump had to say over the weekend. Listen.
I hope he does a better job than he did, frankly, in the Benghazi hearings, because they were a total disaster. He didn't win with those hearings. It was a total not good for Republicans and for the country. I mean, beyond Republicans, it was very bad for the country. So I hope he does a lot better for Marco than he did for the Benghazi hearings.
So Trump critical of Trey Gowdy there, critical of Marco Rubio. Some would argue that it was more Kevin McCarthy's comments on the Benghazi committee that was a factor there. But regardless, Trump is really taking aim here. Should note that Rubio today just canceled his campaign stop in Burlington, Iowa, because of some of the weather that's expected to go through the Midwest. You heard Gabe talking about that just a couple of minutes ago. But somebody who will also be in Iowa next week, Ted Cruz, guys. He's hitting 36 counties in 6 days on this big bus tour that he's doing. This is coming off of his SEC primary state fly around. Now he's focusing on Iowa with basically, once he begins his tour, a month to go until the caucus is there. He's hoping to really shore up some of that support and notch out a victory for him. He's leading in the polls, and it looks like a state where he is all in, and really for him, a must win. Guys?
NBC's Hallie Jackson with the Trump innovation, the pre-endorsement attack on the endorser. I've never seen anything like it. Joining us now, Washington Post political reporter Jenna Johnson. Her latest article asks whether Donald Trump can convert big rallies full of raucous supporters into a big caucus night victory in just 5 weeks. In the article, she writes, Bonnie and Randy Reynolds arrived 2 hours early to a Trump rally in Iowa this month, but when asked if they would caucus, Randy said, we're going to see, you know, with kids and grandkids and all this, it's kind of hectic. We'll look into it. If our time is available, then yeah, maybe we'll do it. Maybe. We'll have to see. I don't know, said another rally goer when asked if she would caucus. I never have. So, do they go? Do they caucus? That's our question this morning, guys.
It was an excellent interpretive reading.
Listen, my parents have been to Trump rallies. I know how you respond when you get a rally on your schedule. It's a different thing to go and caucus. It's a big deal, right, Jenna?
That's just it. And especially in Iowa, the caucuses are really intimidating. Unlike voting in a primary where you have all day, if you haven't showed up by, 4 o'clock, someone's going to give you a call and see where you've been. With the Iowa caucuses, you have to be in line by 7 p.m. on February 1st. That's a Monday night. There's lots of other things going on. If you have to work, if you have kids, if you have to get dinner on the table. And so you have a lot of these Trump fans who are so passionate about him. They want him to be president. They love him. They would vote for him in a general election. But just making that commitment to being at, their precinct at 7 p.m. on February 1st, they just haven't put it on their calendar yet.
It's a great point, and I think the process in Iowa is much more difficult than, say, even voting in New Hampshire primary, right? Much different. But I think one of the most interesting things to look at here is that if Donald Trump does manage to pull this off, and I think we talked a little bit earlier about how we're not sure how many of these people, these fans who come, will actually end up showing up. But if Trump does manage to pull off a win or even a second-place finish in Iowa, think about how he did it. He did it without any of the traditional campaign apparatus. Cool. No TV ads, no internal polls. polling, no campaign focus groups, all of that missing. And
no lists.
No lists, right? Jenna had reported in the Washington Post that he hasn't purchased any of these traditional lists of voters. Instead, they're compiling it one person at a time in Iowa. And John, we were talking a little bit too about the team that Trump has is certainly one that has worked in Iowa before. They, to a certain extent, have experience, know what they're doing. Chuck Laudner was the one who drove Rick Santorum all over the state, ultimately to a somewhat improbable victory in 2012, or at least a victory a couple weeks after the actual
eventual victory.
The eventual victory in Iowa, if you will. But they really do have to do a lot of this legwork themselves, and the task at hand is pretty steep. And I think the reality might be at the end of the day that there are just so many people coming to these rallies that even if only a handful of them, of this giant pool, shows up to caucus, it might be enough for Trump.
You look at this and you can see it in two different ways. One is that Trump has done incredibly well in this state without any of the things, as Casey just said, without doing any of the things that any normal Iowa campaign does. The other thing is that if he ends up falling short in Iowa, it will be one of the great retrospective questions. What if Trump had spent some money here? What if he had done more to convert these giant rallies into actual caucus goers? So, Jenna, my question for you is, with the Iowa caucuses now a little more than a month away, is there any sign that you've seen that the Trump organization is going to start to actually spend some money in Iowa in this, home stretch period?
Well, we'll see. I mean, as far as I know, there's no plans for these big, expensive ads that a lot of other campaigns do. They're doing things differently, and a lot of what they're trying to do is grassroots. They're hoping that word can spread on its own. They're hoping that of the thousands and thousands of people who have gone to these rallies, that enough of them will just choose on their own to show up to the caucuses, that coworkers are going to talk to each other, that word of mouth is going to spread on Facebook and Twitter. Is that going to be enough? They think it is, but we have to wait and see.
All right, Jenna Johnson from the Washington Post, thank you so much. I want to bring back Bob Costa into our picture. Bob, we want to get some more of your quick takes and then go around this table on the state of each of the candidates' campaigns. We've been talking about Donald Trump, so let's stick with that. Give us 3 sentences on the state of Trump Nation.
Trump Nation is very full of fervor right now when it comes to grassroots support, as Jenna said, and he's likely better prepared and better poised to do well in the primaries, New Hampshire, South Carolina. You see he has a strong media presence. That's going to sustain him. Immigration's a key issue, but no ads. How is he going to sustain it if the media presence falls away? We'll have to see. Regardless of what happens in the first 2 states, Newt Gingrich won South Carolina in 2012. That's the state where Trump could come back.
Let's go around the table real quick.
Ted Cruz, I'm interested. Where's his campaign right now?
Ted Cruz is surging in Iowa. And you see, if he could use an Iowa bounce, perhaps you could see him doing well in New Hampshire. And the X factor for him is the Deep South, those March 1st Super Tuesday states. If he can come out of the first few contests with momentum, he's very well organized in the South. But he's a divisive figure, a freshman senator. And if that Trump alliance pays off in the end, it'll be a big help for him getting the nomination.
Can I ask you a Cruz question? I know that Rubio's campaign plans an aggressive contrast effort, if you will, on the issue of national security. Is that having any traction in places where Cruz is starting to see an uptick in the polls?
It is. I think one of the most underreported parts of this campaign is Senator Rubio in Iowa. Remember, Mitt Romney got about a quarter of the electorate vote in Iowa in 2012. There is a mainstream part of the Iowa Republican Party. Rubio's targeting that on national security. If he can come out of Iowa strong and have strong debates in January, he has the establishment support. And if he can weather the immigration issue, he could go into South Carolina, a state full of veterans, people who also keep national security as a key issue, and sustain himself longer into the race.
Bob, is Jeb Bush dead?
I think Jeb Bush is putting it all in New Hampshire. He needs to break out in New Hampshire and not let Christie or Kasich be that candidate.
And Chris Christie, you just mentioned him. We were talking a little earlier about New Hampshire and the chaos there. It seems like if there's anybody who has a little bit of traction, it is the New Jersey governor.
It is. Christie, not so much in Iowa, but in New Hampshire, his town halls have caught on. And if he could eclipse Rubio, Kasich, Bush in New Hampshire, he could jolt the entire race because wealthy donors, instead of rallying to Rubio, could rally to their old favorite, Governor Christie. But the New Jersey record haunts Bridgegate and all of that.
I think, to his point on Chris Christie in New Hampshire, I mean, the raw political skills that Chris Christie has, I mean, sure, it got buried under a lot of the George W. Bush, Bridge, issues and all of that, but he really actually has gone up there and put the thing that he brings to the table to work in New Hampshire. And, and I think to a certain extent, it's all bets are off. I think if we end up seeing a Rubio-Christie showdown, Rubio might be the person who has the most, who is best able to match him in natural
and his
political
drawing
skill.
Crowds in New Hampshire can transfer more easily to votes than somebody drawing crowds in Iowa, because you don't have the caucus set up.
All you have to do is vote.
All you have to do is vote.
Rev, when you look around at this Republican field just right now, what your gut would be, just watching these guys for a year and headed into these first votes, what's your gut say about who's going to make a move? What should we be looking for?
I think my gut is that if Trump wins Iowa, it's over. But I think that as much as I agree with you that if just a small percentage of what he's drawing goes out in caucus, that he may fall a little short, I've got to assume that some of the other candidates are preparing for him to have an overwhelming show, and they may be over-prepared. And if he falls short, somebody's going to fill that gap because they're going to be prepared for the political tsunami. And if it's only a thunderstorm, that's who's going to win that Iowa. And it's going to be, I think that we will see Donald Trump, who is not just a megalomaniac, but narcissistic. I think he's liable to say anything on election night, and it'll be the beginning of the end. His ego will not take a bad beating. It will not.
I know you say all that with love.
With utter love and affection.
You've had good relationships with egomaniacs, narcissists, and megalomaniacs your whole life.
One of the people I've most passionately marched on down through the years. So it's a lot of passion and affection for him. I'm sure that's true. Mostly negative.
Pure passion from the Reverend this morning. Coming up are reports of pornography and lewd language on government emails. Who could be that stupid? Just a smokescreen for another political scandal will go in the state as she releases dozens of pornographic and racist emails that were sent by a long list of state officials, including at least 2 state Supreme Court justices. But Kaine has her own legal issues, and critics say she's simply trying to divert attention from the felony charges hanging over her. Joining us from Philadelphia is freelance writer and editor Natalie Pompalio, who's covering the scandal for the Washington Post. Good morning. Fill us in on this this story that once you start reading and digging in, you really can't stop.
You kind of need all day just to tell this story. But the shortest version I can come up with is for the last 15 months, the Attorney General has been releasing these emails in dribs and drabs. She found them, to make things even more complicated, when she launched an investigation into her office's handling of the Jerry Sandusky case. You probably know Jerry Sandusky, convicted child molester. She says that, she's doing the right thing because she's being targeted by an old boys network, but others say she's just trying to target a few political rivals who are involved in this.
And I just want to, for our viewers who may not know much about this story, as I didn't until I read your reporting, some of the messages, a sampling of the messages, a photo of a pantless woman on her knees performing oral sex, and a caption, "Making your boss happy is your only job," a picture of a white man fending off 2 African-American men while carrying a bucket of fried chicken, reads bravery at its finest. Really, really nasty stuff. Where does this go from here?
I don't know. And by the way, if you look through the emails, you'll actually find yourself getting very bored because you're like, okay, there's another naked woman. Oh, that doesn't look comfortable. I wish I hadn't ever seen that. But they keep coming out. So she has all the emails. We don't know what she'll release next.
Now, Kathleen Kaine has problems of her own, right? So she says that she's being targeted by the Old Boys Network, but she's facing a criminal indictment.
She is. She's been charged with perjury and obstruction of justice for allegedly leaking grand jury testimony, which is illegal. Her rivals say that she did that to make one of her critics look bad because one of her critics, she says, leaked confidential information about an investigation she didn't follow.
And she also has a twin sister who works in her office, right? And so she is also drawn into this burgeoning scandal. Right.
That was the latest twist, and when I was reporting the story, one of the sources said, you're going to find out that her sister's involved too. And I thought, that's impossible. This can't get any messier. No, it's not going to happen. then sure enough, next week, she's revealed to have gotten emails of various natures, maybe less pornographic, but say with a bruised woman, clearly a domestic violence victim, saying sometimes you have to tell her twice.
Natalie, my question for you, just in summary here, is could this thing get any more tawdry? Is it possible that we've reached the depths of tawdriness here, or could this actually evolve in a way that will be even more tawdry in the weeks or days ahead?
It has endless potential for tawdry. Stay tuned. It'll keep going.
And who does this anymore? Who has not learned that what you put in emails, you ought to assume that at some point it could become public?
Especially if it's a state-owned email account. I mean, we're not talking about trading nasty notes on Gmail. Also, I'm seeing that the Post is also reporting that about 10,000 messages have been shared, but there could be as many as 100,000.
It's an unbelievable story. Keep your terrible thoughts to yourself. Don't email them. Natalie Papilio, thank you very much. Up next, we continue to follow breaking news in the fight against ISIS. The Iraqi military has recaptured key parts of the city of Ramadi. The U.S. military confirmed the news just this morning, and Keir Simmons